Well, we're also learning that those officers who may have leaked that information were also promoted within the department. Now, this is just some of the information we're finding out as we read through this 72-page report. Jacqueline doesn't know how many shooters were involved or how many times he was shot. She does believe it was captured on these surveillance cameras outside the house. About a dozen deputies are here on scene. It has been a very long 26 years. I was here last year when this entire parking lot was full of law enforcement officers and grieving community members. We've been up and down the Gulf Coast over the past couple of days. We've seen plenty of damage. We've seen the flooding. We've seen waves coming up over the roads. We've seen trees into homes. This has got to be some of the worst damage that we've seen so far. The state never filed any charges against Eugene Johnson, but we found out today that FDLE sent 2 volumes of case files to the state 1 month ago today. It's just absolutely heartbreaking out here in Lehigh. We're currently standing at 19th Street West and Elaine Avenue North. Take a look at this black billowing smoke. That man is still barricaded inside of his home, and as you can see, crime scene tape is surrounding Henderson Avenue. These are just 2 moms in Southwest Florida grieving the loss of their sons. Just 2 moms begging law enforcement to find the people responsible. 6,450 calls in the past year. It's a lot, but when we looked at what the calls were for, a majority of them were for extra patrols, which is when police check an area known for criminal activity, increasing their visibility to try to make it safer. But is it working? We've been out on this well-known troubled street a few times this past month to see what the people who live there think. The wind has really started to pick up. It's getting harder to stand out here. We want to show you where we are actually. We're in a parking lot right on the Gulf Coast. There's a marina to the left of us. You can see some of the masts on those boats swaying back and forth in the wind there.
Wait News reporter Michelle Kingston is live outside City Hall now with the details.
City councilors are expecting quite the turnout here tonight. They're voting to either keep those bars in the entertainment district open until 4 a.m. or shut down that pilot program altogether. Now, Terilyn Peters says that Devin was on the side of the road on his bike with 1 foot on the grass, another on the pavement when he was hit. She says that the driver drove by the scene at least 3 times, but never stopped. 25 Lee County schools now use restorative practices and have seen out-of-school suspensions drop. Here at the Success Academy, they saw 204 suspensions during the first semester of last year and only 30 this year. Okamic Middle School had 241 suspensions last year compared to just 74 this year. South Fort Myers High School had 128 suspensions last year and just 16 during the first semester of this year. And at Lehigh Acres Middle School, out-of-school suspensions decreased by 66%. Dr. Short has seen a 150% increase in patients addicted to drugs in the past year. He says users are getting younger and younger, but there's no age to addiction. In Lee County last year alone, someone under the age of 18 died from heroin, but people over the age of 50 overdosed as well. We've been making calls all afternoon, knocking on doors, ringing doorbells, driving all across Lee County, but either got no answer, no one home, or the former and current city leaders issued a subpoena didn't want to comment.
How bad is this locally in our community?
It's bad, and it's here, and it's a problem that people hear about across the country. They think it's in big cities, but it's also in the suburbs, and it's also right here in Southwest Florida. Users are getting younger and younger, and from a recent JAMA report, we're now learning that it's young white men that are using. CEOs of companies, college students, it doesn't matter who you are, this drug is affecting a lot of families, and families right here in Southwest Florida. Good morning and thank you for joining us. I'm Michelle Kingston. Breaking now, a man accused of invading a Cape Coral home and stealing the family's Christmas presents is now in jail. Wink News just learned there were little improvements overnight for the Fort Myers mother struck by lightning. New information about a synthetic drug that brought a lot of harm to South Florida about a year ago, and we are seeing it pop up again. Right now, the White House is operating back to normal after a very scary shooting. The Secret Service says one of its agents shot a man who approached a White House checkpoint carrying a gun. Now this morning, a 6-year-old Cape Coral pirate is giving back to the community.
You're a huge Star Wars fan. Which one's your favorite movie?
I wouldn't even be able to tell you what the other names are. I don't even know how many there have been.
Sorry, she doesn't like Star Wars. Fans out there, sorry.
And a popular event all about being free. It's the 26th annual Freedom Swim in Punta Gorda, where hundreds of people make their way across the Peace River. Boats, floats, kayaks, and more. There's no one way to make the 1.5-mile voyage from Charlotte Harbor to Fisherman's Village for the annual Freedom Swim. You can even swim naked if you want. My goodness. Oh. Well, it all started 26 years ago when a few friends wanted something new to do to kick off Independence Day celebrations. And friends said their final goodbyes last summer. 14-year-old Sean Achilles and 18-year-old Stefan Strouder.
I miss him so much.
Two teens with big hearts who loved basketball, whose innocent lives were taken too soon.
It's painful. It's as painful as it was a year ago.
Crime Stoppers received 39 tips over the past year about the Club Blue mass shooting, but it's still unsolved.
And we received a tip as recently as this week. So it just goes to show that there are people out there that have information.
But law enforcement believe the dozens of people who were at Club Blue for the teen night are afraid to come forward, afraid to speak up about the night bullets went flying throughout the parking lot. But it's not stopping police from working this case and trying to bring justice to the grieving families.
It's an active case. We talk about it, we work on it, we follow leads, we think outside the box with all aspects of it, not just with finding the people, but what really went down, why did it really happen, who was really responsible for not maybe for pulling the trigger, but was there something behind the scenes going on?
Following leads, trying to solve this unthinkable crime.
It's chaos. There's no other way of how to explain it. It is pure chaos.
Police say they're dedicated to putting those responsible behind bars.
We're not giving up on this case. I'm not going to make this a cold case.
Hours after the shooting, police had 3 people in custody, but they've since been released. Police found a stolen car burning at a complex near the Edison Mall. Investigators say it's connected to the shooting. They also discovered 2 high-powered rifles at that scene. But all of this still not enough to solve one of the city's most heinous crimes.
Not solved, still very, very active. And the players that were involved that night need to know that time may have passed. They are still very high up on our radar, and their time is going to come.
Now, it took 36 hours for the first tip to come into Crime Stoppers last year after this shooting. We just learned the Fort Myers Police Department did turn their investigation over to the state attorney's office for review. Fort Myers Police Department says that doesn't mean that their investigation is over. They say it is still very active and ongoing, and they're asking for you to come forward with tips to help solve this crime. Since the report was released, the chief hasn't wanted to talk about it. He called the report concerning, but says the past is the past. He wants to move the department forward, and he's doing just that. What were you thinking when you started to read that?
I'm not going to talk about what happened when I first reaction and stuff. The bottom line is this. I was frustrated, and I'm concerned. But the report is the report. It's there.
Police Chief Derek Diggs talking one-on-one with Wink News.
They're going to find things that you don't like to hear or you don't want to see.
Just a little more than 2 weeks after a scathing 72-page report was released detailing heinous allegations of drug planting, officers leaking information to dealers about search warrants, and even officers moving up in rank without proper qualifications.
Yes, the free report identified some things. I'm concerned and frustrated about it. But I'm just as frustrated with folks not understanding that we're doing the right things for this police department that's understaffed, under-resourced, and yet we're getting the job done.
Chief Diggs joined the force less than a year ago and says he started working on recommendations listed in the free report on day 1. And he's committed to completing all 32 of the recommendations within the next 5 years. How do you now take that and move forward, find the needle in the haystack? The people who are causing the problems within the department?
That's very simple. Follow the recommendations. That's the guidelines. That's the roadmap.
Today about his request to hire the U.S. Attorney's Office to investigate officer misconduct allegations within the department. He's unable to comment on that, but told us he's dedicated to moving the department forward and making it one the community can be proud of. Live in Fort Myers, Michelle Kingston, Wink News Now.
Michelle, thank you.
A 400-acre brush fire swept through Lehigh Acres on Friday.
It's gone. It's completely gone.
4 homes destroyed, another handful were damaged.
When I came outside, I saw like a big smoke in the sky.
People who live off these streets congregated on Sunshine Boulevard North when they evacuated their homes. Many of them telling me on Friday night that there are no fire hydrants in their neighborhood, including the street that Maxine Perry lived on before her home was destroyed.
Oh, no insurance. It's too expensive. They wanted a fire hydrant on the street, and I guess you got to pay for it, and we couldn't afford that. We're both really low income.
This map shows all 1,100 fire hydrants in Lehigh Acres. Those red dots indicate where they're located, typically in areas where there are businesses, not the areas that are on septic and well water. Here in Lehigh Acres on the very busy Lee Boulevard, there are a lot of businesses and homes off of this street. Therefore, there are a lot of these yellow fire hydrants. But on streets like these that were affected by that more than 400-acre brush fire on Friday night that burned 4 homes to the ground, take a look around. There's not a single fire hydrant in sight. In fact, the closest fire hydrant to this area is on Fountain Mist Boulevard inside this gated community, more than a mile away from where the fire started. Firefighters bring their own water to fires, but say having more hydrants would definitely help them. But it's an expensive project and one they have no control over. Now, homes in this area are on septic and on well water, so according to the FGUA, they're unable to install fire hydrants here because there aren't any water main lines. Live in Lehigh Acres, Michelle Kingston, Wink News Now.
Now to a Wink News exclusive: heroin in Southwest Florida. The numbers of those using are staggering.
And the lives lost to this dangerous, deadly drug are increasing day by day. Over the next 2 nights, Wink News reporter Michelle Kingston will introduce us to people affected by opioids plaguing our state and what is being done to stop it. Tonight, she shows us the faces of addiction.
Relapsed on heroin and crack all in one day.
If you think heroin is only a big city problem and nowhere near Fort Myers, Florida, you're wrong.
I've seen lots of drugs being sold right here.
Young men and women doing whatever it takes to get their fix right here in our own backyard.
Basically, you have to medicate yourself to do some of the things that you do because you really don't want to do it.
The average person shooting heroin has changed. White men are now the majority of users.
They're prescribed prescription medicines for pain management to treat a legitimate problem that they had. That treatment accidentally became an addiction. Now their source to feed that addiction has been taken away, and they're having to seek that from other sources. They're turning to the heroin dealer.
The dealer on the street selling the deadly drug for less than $20 a bag.
Heroin users range from CEOs to companies to the unemployed kid looking for work right out of college.
Dr. Short has seen a 150% increase in patients addicted to drugs in the past year. He says users are getting younger and younger, but there's no age to addiction. In Lee County last year alone, someone under the age of 18 died from heroin, but people over the age of 50 overdosed as well.
You know, I've seen a lot of people OD, die, go to jail, lose their families, their houses, cars, jobs.
This former dealer and addict describes the high he felt when turning to heroin after pills and alcohol just weren't strong enough.
I'm perfect, I guess. Invincible. Like nothing bothers you.
She was real good in school, you know, almost straight A's. She won beauty pageants when she was in high school.
This mom watched her daughter turn to drugs in college.
And when I saw her, I couldn't believe it. She was down to nothing. Her weight had just dropped, just plummeted. And when I hugged her, it just felt like I was hugging a skeleton.
Heroin use has more than doubled in the past decade among young adults across the country. Deaths caused by the drug in our state alone have increased nearly 80% over the past year. Southwest Florida specifically lost more than 55 people to the drug in 2015. Lee County, one of the hardest hit last year.
I have broken marriages, busted jobs, the whole gamut of how far down in the hole can you go. And I've been there.
James Byram didn't come from a broken home. He's not a high school dropout. He's not from the inner city.
I had the best of clothing, the best of schooling.
Byram's addiction started with marijuana and spiraled.
You can take a slice right out of the middle of America and the story will be the same. It got to a point where choices had to be made, and I made the wrong choice.
He's lost a daughter to the same addiction he fights every day, and now works hard to make sure he doesn't lose another child who is also struggling to stay sober. Her addiction began when she turned to heroin after her pain pill prescription ran out.
It took away my pain instantly, and I felt like I was a normal person with no injuries. And I felt like I could go out and run 6 miles like I used to when I was in the military.
Together, they sit through meetings.
So in order to not come back to where we were, we have to change the way we think.
Together, these recovering addicts fight to stay alive.
It's a battle. It's like you're going into war and you're leaving everything behind.
With overdoses now causing more deaths than car crashes, some say we're facing the worst drug epidemic in United States history.
Drugs can be found anywhere. It doesn't matter where, it doesn't matter what state, what county. Drugs are definitely a big issue no matter where you go.
Right now, Wink News continues our exclusive heroin series. Tonight, reporter Michelle Kingston explains who this deadly drug hurts the most and what some local law enforcement agencies are doing to keep families here safe.
These photos have been shared more than 30,000 times. Two people nearly passed out, high on heroin, at a traffic stop in Ohio. Heads bobbing, eyes shut. A 4-year-old boy sits in the back seat.
That really took the internet by storm. It's a very visceral depiction of the reality of heroin addiction.
Just last month, similar scenes in Cape Coral. On 2 different nights, 2 different men found slumped over behind the wheel on heroin.
It's not coming, it has arrived.
These are the faces of addiction.
One thing that addicts always say, especially when they haven't reached their bottom, is, oh, well, that won't be me. I haven't gotten there yet. I'm never going to be that bad. And, never say never. I'll never do this. That'll never happen to me. Never, never, never. I've pretty much run out of the nevers.
These are the faces of who heroin hurts the most. Families and children, like the young boy in the back seat. And moms like Susan McNichol.
Somebody told me once that if she didn't quit using by the time she was 40, she would probably kill herself.
A mom who says she'll never forget the years her daughter was high on drugs.
You go through every emotion under the sun. You hate them one day, but you always love them because they're your kids.
The Florida Department of Law Enforcement calls heroin one of the deadliest drugs of 2015.
Unfortunately, we continue to see increased heroin abuse in the community.
The number of overdoses seen at Lee Health prove how many families have been torn apart because of its potency right here in Southwest Florida.
It seems that the heroin is getting more and more dangerous. Oftentimes it's life-threatening or can kill someone.
And in Charlotte County,
we see day in and day out how drugs hurt people, families, communities.
The sheriff's office has stopped punishing many heroin users and now brings any addict who is ready for recovery to a place where they can receive treatment.
If you walk up to one of our deputies, if you call us to your location, or you walk into our office, you're going to get that help.
Help so desperately needed.
I love you enough to let you hate me long enough until you realize I'm trying to save your life.
James Byram, a recovering addict himself, hosts meetings at a halfway house.
And I got a lot of people that really don't like me, but they're sober today and they've come back and said, thanks for doing what you did.
As if I didn't turn around now, I was going to die. I had to lose almost everything just to realize that I still have a chance to come back and try to regain it all.
Lee County ranks 4th in the state in the frequency of heroin showing up in the system of people who passed away last year. One local mom wants to make sure she doesn't become part of that statistic.
I would wake up, and if I did not have a shot ready within 5 minutes, I was throwing up.
She's in recovery now after leaving the military, getting hooked on heroin, and losing custody of her children.
It does not matter where I go, where my children go, as long as I know that they're in my heart, they're with me.
We checked in with the Lee County Sheriff's Office and the Fort Myers Police Department a number of times while researching for this series. They told me they will not comment. Later tonight, we'll show you just how easy it is to find this deadly drug on our streets. The final story in our exclusive heroin series airs tonight on Wink News at 11. In the studio, Michelle Kingston, Wink News Now.
Wink News also contacted the lawyers for the 2 men Cape Coral police say were found unresponsive in their cars last month. You saw them at the beginning of the story. One attorney didn't return our call. The other had no comment. Only Wink News taking you onto the streets of Lee County to show you just how close this dangerous drug of heroin really is. Tonight Beats Michelle Kingston picking up our Wink News exclusive series from US 41.
This is how easy it is for someone to get drugs down here.
It's Friday night in Fort Myers.
Lots of dope in here. Lots of dope in here.
We're riding along US 41 with a drug addict in recovery.
He is on heroin and crack out of there.
He's asked us to hide his face and change his voice. We're calling him Michael for his safety.
The guy that manages this motel, he does heroin.
He points out motels and inns, convenience stores and gas stations where he says he knows drugs are being sold, because these are the spots where he says he'd buy heroin, right here in Fort Myers.
You know, a lot of us out here are broken, and that's why they're out here.
With drugs comes prostitution, and girls and pimps are seen walking down these streets every night of the week.
Hey, baby.
We see firsthand how easy it is to buy drugs in women.
What's going on, baby? How you doing?
The woman walks over to her car and tells Michael she's ready to party.
How much?
When Michael was using, he made ads on Backpage for Money, a popular site for girls selling themselves for sex.
I stayed in the hotel every night.
So you would make enough money to pay for a room?
We'd make enough money to buy our drugs and buy a room.
But motel owners in the hottest drug spots in town deny any problems in their rooms. You don't see prostitutes coming into these rooms? The Fort Myers Inn refused to comment for our story, but according to the Lee County Sheriff's Office, deputies have responded to the motel more than 400 times in the past year for all types of calls, including drugs.
If we can save 1, 2, or 3 people out of 10, it makes my hours in the day worth it.
Doctors like Brandon Short are aware of the drug use in the county. He works with recovering addicts.
We see about a 30% recovery rate, but 30% is better than 0%.
He tries every day to keep people off the streets, away from heroin. But the toughest part of his job is knowing he can't save them all.
If they're not ready, you can't talk them into being ready. It has to be what they want.
You gotta man up. No one's gonna take control of your life but you. No one's gonna make that step but you. So you gotta just make it. You gotta do it.
Michelle Kingston, Wink News Now.
We've posted all 3 stories in our heroin series on the Wink News Facebook page and on winknews.com.
And I felt really nervous, like shaky.
A burglar in Cape Coral climbed through a window, stealing jewelry, alcohol, and a camera before getting away.
What kind of people or animals have been inside my home?
A similar scene a few months later in Lehigh Acres.
I was sobbing. Anger, concern, fear.
According to a SafeWise report, a burglary takes place every 18 seconds in the United States.
He was hiding, he was standing in this little alcove.
The Florida Department of Law Enforcement says burglaries have decreased in the state of Florida over the past 5 years, but they are the least solved crime in our region. And in the state of Florida, there were more than 100,000 burglaries compared to about 1,000 murders last year. And while more than half of the murders were solved, 83% of the burglaries were not.
It was just very, very scary because it was an invasion of privacy.
Oftentimes, victims don't file reports, don't want to press charges, or there's a lack of evidence, and the criminals get away.
They want to work fast, get in and get out. They don't want to attract attention to themselves.
With so many burglaries going unsolved, police recommend purchasing a home security system and install a camera that can often help solve the crime. The crime that leaves you not only feeling vulnerable and terrified, but also out hundreds, if not thousands of dollars. The FBI reports burglary victims lost $4 billion in 2010.
A lot of times the damages that's caused don't meet your deductible, so there's really no coverage at all.
The FBI says victims lose an average of about $2,000, and homeowners insurance doesn't typically cover these crimes. They recommend taking photos of your valuables now in order to help you get some of your money back if you fall victim to the crime in the future. Live in the studio, Michelle Kingston, Wink News Now.
Dear Michelle, my name is Tiffany Major, and I am one of the many concerned parents of Lee County. Our community has cried out on numerous occasions due to the crime we have been experiencing, with our young teens being killed left and right.
Last month, Wink News introduced you to these inspiring young mothers.
I'm trying my best to make Fort Myers known for more than just Club Blue.
Writing dozens of letters to First Lady Michelle Obama, hoping to bring change to Southwest Florida.
I wake up to, well, that person was shot, or that person was shot. It's getting out of control, completely out of control, and it's young kids. It's 17, 18, 19.
Letter after letter, shooting after shooting. These women finally received a response from the First Lady. Her schedule too busy for the trip.
We're hoping that eventually they will make their way down here. Hopefully she'll see that it's not only irate mothers and fathers, there's children out here that are crying out for help that want something to change in their city. But I am going to keep writing, and I'm going to keep encouraging others to write, and sooner or later you are going to wonder what this little town is about. I'm not going to stop writing. I'm not going to stop writing.
Michelle Kingston, Wink News Now. 6,450 calls in the past year. It's a lot, but when we looked at what the calls were for, a majority of them were for extra patrols, which is when police check an area known for criminal activity, increasing their visibility to try to make it safer. But is it working? We've been out on this well-known troubled street a few times this past month to see what the people who live there think.
Sometimes you hear gunshots.
Last year, it just got more and more aggressive.
Davis Court is a street in the center of the Harlan Lakes neighborhood in Fort Myers. One day last year, it saw 2 shootings in just 7 hours.
We got a gunshot drill. It's sad, but it's true.
And over the past 365 days, it hasn't gotten much better. Just last month, this car was hit by random gunfire.
The paths of the bullet would have been straight through that bedroom window.
It's a wildfire with gun violence.
Davis Court is a street filled with families, working adults, and a lot of crime. Police have responded there 6,450 times in the past year. 12 of those calls were for gunshots. Compare those numbers to a street right next to Davis Court, Fairview Avenue. Police responded there 289 times. 8 were for gunshots. A street just across Martin Luther King Boulevard, Lemon Street, saw just 81 calls. 2 were for gunshots. And Sandra Drive, further south off McGregor Boulevard, saw just 30 calls and no gunshots in the past year.
Gotta stop killing each other. We gotta learn how to help uplift each other.
Eric Walker lives on Davis Court with his family. They moved here a year ago to try to bring about change to the community through faith and love.
Faith, 96 Bulls,
and Christian-based hip-hop. They're frustrated by the hundreds of thousands of dollars put into the cameras on the end of the street.
They could have gave us that money. We could have built the team of mentors.
They say Fort Myers could be a safer community if the people and the police had a better relationship.
And it's not gonna start with a kickball game. It's gonna start with knowing how they really live.
And in the meantime, this couple will work together to try to make Davis Court a safer place.
We don't live off of fear. We live off of faith and love.
The home that the Walkers live in was almost a substation for police. Fort Myers police say they're considering several spots for substations to better monitor troubled neighborhoods. They wouldn't tell us where or when that might happen. We also requested an interview with the Fort Myers police chief about Davis Court, but we did not hear back. Live in the studio, Michelle Kingston, Wink News Now.